Hey, what's up, Liron here. In today's video, we're going to talk about why flow doesn't really matter in watercolor. I'm going to prove it to you. So if you're obsessing over things flowing and you're really worried that the painting is going to be still, I'm going to show you why it doesn't matter as much as you may think. Now, what are we looking at here? So we're going to learn another interesting lesson. This is a photo I took back in New York in 2019. Absolutely love it. Sat down for a morning coffee, saw this lovely scene, decided to paint it. The thing is, and took a picture of it a couple of years later, here I am painting it. The thing is, I wasn't pleased with the result. The reason was, I felt like the green van, which was the entire reason I even took this photo to begin with, didn't get enough attention, and it kind of got lost in there. I wasn't able to really paint it the way I wanted to. So this is an example of me pivoting, understanding that something does not work and trying something different. So what you're going to see me do in a second is I'm going to crop the photo horizontally and zoom in instead and give more focus to the green van. Here's the final result of that, but this is going to be today's process. Now you can truly see the van. Very often, if a photo doesn't work for you, but you still love it, but something doesn't work in the painting, it could be that the photo is good, but it just the way you're oriented doesn't work. So let's get to it. I'm going to show you the flow. So I'm starting with the windshield. I like to sometimes just pick a spot to start. Now, when you look at how I paint cars, I'm highly, not to brag, I'm highly effective at it. I'm very experienced in it. I've done it for a long time in multiple iterations, and I notice a lot of things that interest me. By the way, I know nothing about cars in real life. I have no idea, nothing. I just love the way they look visually. The more boring, mundane the car is, the more day-to-day the picture is, the more I enjoy it. But I like to mark a spot and just focus on that. Sometimes it's the windshield because it has a lot of interesting effects and reflections in it. So I'm working this area, and while it's still wet, I am improving it. I'm adding the values as I see them. This isn't final. I'm gonna probably go back over this area, but I want to share with you something really fascinating here. I'm using very dark paint. So, you know, they say paint light to dark. Who cares? I just like to paint the way I like to paint. And it ends up with this, me basically laying in the darks, kind of like you would with oils. What you have to understand about this kind of a wash is it is not flowing together. Yes, it appears to be right now when I place it, but it really doesn't flow together. It's too dry to get a good flow. And you're gonna see this taken to the extreme in a couple of seconds there when I add the side of the van. And look at, by the way, how long it takes me to mix that green color. In a second you'll see the top is a little bit olivey, so that's fine. But if you look at the side of the van, it has more of an artificial feeling to it, and I'm gonna have to spend some time mixing it. But look at this, okay, the blue that I'm putting right now for the hood, it doesn't really mix with the windshield, right? The windshield is dry, everything is dry. I'm just placing in what I'm seeing and what inspires me in this scene, what makes me want to paint it. That's how I do this scene. Now look at this, okay? So I'm pulling from my sap green, but then I had to add something to make it look a little more artificial. Now I'm gonna add a bit of red to neutralize it. Here we go, it's a little more neutralized, dark. Look at the window to the left, the dark window I put earlier. You think what I'm painting right now is gonna merge with that and make a nice smooth wash? No, it's fully dry. If you paint it more than once, twice, 3 times, complete paintings in watercolor, you can tell immediately. Because very often I'm asked by beginners, is the paper wet or is it dry when I paint? And you know, if you have just a bit of experience, you can then, that's fine. If you're a beginner, that's fine. But if you have a bit of experience, you can very easily tell whenever someone paints over wet paper or dry paper, and you can tell, you get a sixth sense to how wet a wash is. So if you look at the edges of this wash, they're not wet. Everything is drying, everything is in patches. Now, the reason it will still work, the reason it will still look good is because the colors, the values, the shapes are all in place. The flow between them, while you may enjoy that look, it could be a stylistic choice, it could be something you appreciate, it could be something you enjoy painting, you enjoy the flow. I love the flow of watercolor, don't get me wrong. But other than that, it's not a necessity to make a fantastic piece of art. That's the distinction there. You may feel free to always have things flow together. If that's your thing, if all the previous things I mentioned, You like it, you like to paint that way, you enjoy painting this way, you like the look of it, you like the feel of it, you like other people's art whenever it flows, that's perfectly fine. These are all choices. What I'm saying it is not an inherent necessity to make a masterpiece, to paint a masterpiece. And the more you dive deeper on that kind of statement, nothing is really a necessity to make a masterpiece. Almost nothing is. Maybe if you leave the page blank, it's not a masterpiece. But as long as you put something in it, it has a potential of being a masterpiece. The idea is there are no rules. There really are no rules. Not as a revelatory statement, not as a to go against the grain. There really aren't. This is a statement of fact. Everything in the piece of art is organic. It works in its own way. It's highly contextual. But one thing that does not matter for sure is flow. Okay? Now you can say, but Liron, wait, it does matter because when the work has more flow, then I like it. I find it more like it's watercolor, etc., etc. That's fine, but it's not a mandatory thing in any way. Everything I'm doing right now, and again, I'm going to challenge this again and again in this video, okay? And I'm cutting out this process. Don't worry, it's not going to be too long of a process, but I want to show you there are some fascinating bits there, so stay tuned for the cars on the left. But look at the shadow of the van to the left. Look at the body of the van, the greens that I put there. All of these edges, they're not wet. They're dry. I'm painting almost as if I'm using oils or gouache, dare I say, which keep an eye out for that because that video is coming soon. Wink, wink. But it works. It works. It looks good. Because it's not a must. Now again, sometimes I'm in the mood, right? If I'm in the mood to paint something that flows, I'm in the mood, I'll enjoy it. But when I'm not, when I just want to place paint on paper, whatever happens, whatever it looks like, it'll look like, then I'm not bound by a rule that everything has to flow, that I have to do an underpainting that connects everything together. Now, I do want to mention something that has to do with the look of watercolor, and you saw me now spraying a bit of water on the colors, which I'll talk about in a second. I do want to mention something that has to do with that look and that flow. When you look at this painting, you can't deny it's a watercolor. You can see flow within smaller areas and shapes, so it's not like everything here is individual brush strokes that are standalone, right? When I'm painting this background, I am painting it in one go. There is some flow there. Right? It could be patchy, it could have some edges that have already dried, but there is flow undeniably in smaller pockets. So if you're worried it's not going to look like watercolor or it's going to look very stale, not at all. The fact you're using watercolor will show no matter what. It's very hard to just avoid or keep it a secret that it's a watercolor. So if you're worried about that kind of a thing, maybe this puts your mind at ease. Now let's talk a bit about colors. You may notice I'm reaching into almost every color I have here. So yes, I'm a big fan of primary colors. So it's mostly yellows and reds and blues, and I'm using all of them. I'm using French ultramarine, I'm using phthalo blue, I'm using pyrrole scarlet, I'm using vermilion, I'm using orange, I'm using everything. I don't really care what color I reach into because I'm just using all of them. If you use all of them, you can mix everything with them. That's kind of how it works. Some areas that feel very strongly red, I'll use mostly a yellow and a red, or a yellow and a violet, or just red, or an orange. You know, some areas that are very muted and dim, I'm using all of the colors. Some areas where I'm trying to mix a very dark paint, I'm going to be using burnt umber and French ultramarine, because that gets me these darks fast. If I want them to have more of a green tint, I'm going to use the same burnt umber, but with phthalo blue, right? So it's very contextual. Now I want to show you, to me, one of the highlights of this painting, this car. I'm painting the windshield, and look at what I'm doing here. I'm blending that edge. The reason I'm blending that edge is it catches the light, and I noticed, I learned for myself, I developed this. I absolutely love when a painting like this is broken by strong highlights that have soft edges. I find that very often it's like a little spot of joy in a painting that really adds a lot, breaks the structure, creates an interesting focal point, or a sub-focal point, if you will, because the green van to me is still the main focal point here. And that's exactly the role that this card is going to play. Not only I have there the blue and that smooth shape, you'll see in a couple of seconds after I darken the background, I'm going to play around with the temperatures as well. So right now we have cool, I'm going to add warm to it. You're going to see in a couple of seconds. So this car ends up being a lovely focal point. But first, I do like to close off the dark, sometimes in these cases especially. And look at this. I'm putting in lemon yellow. This is just clean lemon yellow from the palette into the dark background. I find this to be a very quick way of getting foliage that still you want it to show. It's a very opaque yellow. So you can place it within darks and it will still show. It will have a strong presence, which I love. So that's a quick trick. Again, these are things I discovered for myself that work for me. I'm not following a method. I'm not following anyone else's plan, because by doing so, I'm highly limiting the potential of painting something that is a masterpiece of my own. It could be nice, it could look good, and a lot of you that talk about lack of motivation, a lot of you, it sounds like I'm berating, the reason you have that is because you're following someone else's path. As soon as you are able to taste just once painting for yourself, you'll know what it feels like, and it will change everything. It will change everything. These videos I'm doing, I don't expect anyone to follow them necessarily, not even to paint along. And look at this beautiful, already warm and cool structure together. I don't expect necessarily anyone to follow the process to the T. What I am interested maybe in them achieving is inspiring someone out there to do the same thing I'm doing for themselves. That's the point. And my videos are longer and they're more in depth and they require you to focus a bit, and I'm aware of that. I'm not making these cutesy videos where you're just kind of, let's play around with paint, throw it on paper, let's swatch. No, I'm diving deeper on the ideas, but hopefully that can inspire someone out there to do this for themselves, right? Now, when we look at where we are right now, the key ingredients we're missing, others than the cars, some details there, is the ground and darks. If you look at the van in the photo, my van, that in my opinion looks fantastic, is still very light. So we don't get that punchiness. We're gonna get that in a couple of moments once we add the shadows there. So don't worry, you know, a lot of people, they paint, and look at these tires, everything, painting in one go. Again, years of painting cars. Combining this shadow with what is a bicycle there, I'm kind of hinting at it. You know, this is, a lot of people paint the first wash and then they're scared. Look at this mix, by the way. It's not going to be fully orange. I'm going to add some blue and coolness to it, or grayness to it. A lot of people are, they finish a wash and they are fearful because it doesn't look like the thing. It's not done. Look at the ground, the context it gives, just like I've shown you in the portraits, right? Adding the lights later on after painting the shadows. I love it. I love the way it gives the highlights more of a meaning. But in any case, you finish the first wash or one wash, it doesn't look final or complete, that's fine. You can paint over it and darken it and change it and do a bunch of things to it to bring it to completion. It is very rare, sometimes it happens, but to me it's very rare to complete something in one go. Whenever it happens, I'm super grateful and I enjoy it and it feels good, but it's not a result I aspire to. If it's a part of my process, very naturally, very honestly, I just paint what I want and it happens to be the case, then it happens to be the case. Very often it isn't the case. So now I'm gonna start adding some shadows to the van, really bringing out the interest in it, because you see all sorts of different patterns, reflections. If you look at the lower half, you see some fascinating highlights there, and also on the door. This all has to do with angles of the metal making up the chassis or the body of the car and the surrounding. So usually what you'll notice is the lower parts of cars, the rounder they are, you'll notice this more, they reflect the ground. So you'll get a dark under the windows and then it goes light, which I love that effect. But what's important to notice, I left some highlights there, they need to be darker. So even the highlights in the photo, mine are still too light, so you'll see me gradually adding them in. What I love about all of these muted colors is you have a lot of freedom. The more of a collection of muted colors you have, the more you can get away with in terms of harmony. But if you crank up the saturation on all of the things you're on all of the scene, your blues are very bright, your yellows are very bright, your reds, your whatever it is, your greens, it starts to fall apart. The balance is off. But if you limit the saturation, again, you don't have to do anything I say, I'm just stating a fact. The more colorful every color is, the more it tends to run the risk of losing color harmony. Now you might say, I don't care about color harmony. Go ahead, do your thing, right? Just I'm mentioning to those who look at something and think the colors are off. That's a possible explanation. Now I'm adding more darks within the darks. It's important for me to maintain the colors I love and the colors that do work, and to add the shadows where necessary. So I'm gonna frame this headlight in a beautiful way. It's gonna make it pop a lot more. I really, really like the way this turned out. Can you tell? I really like the way this one turned out. That green van, I completely forgot about this photo. Again, took it back in 2019. Went over some old photos, I'm like, I'm gonna paint this. And let's go back for a second to the beginning of the video. You saw me starting, here's the bicycle I told you about earlier, and I'm gonna splash some shadows there. You saw me starting with a different composition. It wasn't working, I didn't like it, something wasn't clicking. But then I changed the perspective a bit, I cropped it differently, and voila, I got something that inspired me, myself, to paint, which is the most important thing if you ask me. It doesn't really matter what you paint if you're inspired to paint it, because when you're inspired to paint it, you will produce a piece of art, you will see things about it no one else sees, you will maybe add to it something that wasn't there but makes it look fantastic, you know. Now, one more thing that's missing that I haven't mentioned yet is, you could say some details, but I would say some color. So we have a bit of red, we have a bit of green, but mostly this is like a green, blue, neutral, warm painting. What we're gonna do in a second is start adding, once you see the reflection of these, there's this thing around the tree, protecting it. It all reflects on the body of the van. The more you add these details, the more everything falls into context and looks just fantastic. So we're gonna add all of these small details, but look at the background for a second. The background here, we put something very basic. It looks good, but there's a lot more we can do. We can add more color to it. We can add some of the signs. We can add a lot of details to it. Now, I noticed the right side of the background was too light. So I'm gonna close it off with a bit of darks, but my darker darks from the previous wash will still show through. That's the idea. And now we're, as I mentioned, starting to work on the signs, the traffic lights. So this happened to be a highlight. So I'm placing it with my white gel pen. All my art supplies are in the description box below, and also the courses. If you want to learn how to paint like this, check out the frustration-free watercolor course link below, or the watercolor realism course. And if you want more paintings like this one, check out my painting a masterpiece book. You'll like that one too. It's the 100 cars challenge. All of the 100 cars I painted in one book and some more bonuses. You'll love it. Absolutely love it if you're looking for like a coffee table book or an art book. I only have one, so this is the one to get if you're interested. And if you know someone, by the way, do me a favor. If you know someone who's into watercolor and will enjoy it as a gift, I would appreciate if you get it for them as a gift. Some people have already and messaged me about it. I'm super grateful for that, and the people who got it as a gift loved it. So here's our splash of color. Look at this little bit of red and yellow. Maybe it's my own personal taste, maybe it's how I like it, but I love when some of these colors show. I like to show all primary colors if I can. It was really missing a clean yellow, a clean red. The blue it did have on the windshield. That's just me, you know, everyone's gonna treat this differently. I love that kind of a thing. And here we are, we're gonna put in some direction lines to mark where the pavement pattern kind of is. Notice how it's gonna solidify it, especially these ones I'm gonna add right now, the more horizontal ones. It's gonna really solidify it and make it feel good, because the shadows right now are at a different angle. The shadows cast by the bicycle and all of that, they're at a different angle, but look at what happens once we anchor the ground. It tells a more complete story, and it looks wonderful, right? So now we're pretty much done. A few touches, the shadow under the tree, the shadow cast by it. That was one of the things that was important for me. Now, you'll notice I started with a bit of a violety purple mixture. I wanted to use that to contrast the warmth of the road underneath it. That's something I'll sometimes do. It could be just a gray. You could use just a gray for it and it would still look a little purpley, but I thought let's crank up the volume on that. Now I'm kind of, I don't know, I almost played around with it to a fault that I didn't get a dark enough color, so I constantly had to add to it, but now it's dark enough, I believe. Just a few more touches and it's done. At this stage, the painting is officially done. There isn't really something to... One thing I haven't added all the way till the end, and I still haven't added, the car to the right of the van. You see that black car? The lower part of it should be a little darker. It's a very starking highlight. That's the one thing I still haven't corrected it to this day. I guess I don't care as much, and it looks perfect to me. Maybe I'll change it. Maybe I'll edit it later. It should be darker. It's very clear to see in the photo, and it will give it a better kind of three-dimensional shape. Maybe I'll do it later. Who cares? Now, a lot of people ask, how do you know when the painting is done? How do you avoid overworking it? How do you... All of these things, honestly, I'm looking, I'm observing, I'm seeing, is there something in the photo that I haven't included yet that I think will make it look great? Is there something that doesn't get enough attention? Is there something I put too much attention to and I kind of need to dab away and to maybe lift a bit? And if nothing significant pops up, I'm done. I'm done. You decide when the painting is complete. There is no binary yes or no answer. Nothing like that. It's your decision. Now what was missing here is a rounded gradual shadow. So I pre-wet the hood and now I'm going to add on top of it, look at this paint, it's going to make it look rounder, it's going to make this edge darker, and it's going to make it look good and more natural. This actually made a big impact on the painting. Some darks there. The entire windshield should be darker, but I kind of like this light blue, so I decided to keep it that way. I'm going to dab a bit of this. What I put here was a little too dark. And we're going to sign this. And this one is done. Again, this is why I say flow doesn't matter. Look at all of these fragmented pieces. They still look wonderful together. Even though they're fragmented pieces, they look wonderful. It works. It tells the story. It's a watercolor where it needs to be. And most important, you're not following any rule, thus you're not limiting yourself to anything. You can paint however you want. When all possibilities are open, you find the most perfect path, the most perfect solution to any problem. Whereas where you limit them, maybe you'll find a good solution or a decent solution. It won't feel like it's fully yours though. You won't own it, not in the bad way of owning it, but in a good way of owning it, owning the process. The piece of art itself, once it's out in the world, I no longer really feel like I own it. It came from somewhere, who knows where. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out the courses, the books. Do me a favor if you can, check it out. I want to thank everyone who supports me over on Patreon. You make this possible for me to make tons of videos for everyone for free. This is just, if you want to receive credits at the end of the videos, no special perks, which is why I'm, other than that, that's a perk still, but this is why I'm super grateful to everyone there, because it's just about people who want to give, and I really, really appreciate it. This has been a challenging year so far, so even more so, I'm very grateful to everyone who supports me in any way. Even if you just leave a like, leave a comment on the video, I highly appreciate it. In any case, I'm going to stop rambling on. See you in the next vid. Take care.